Hello, my friends. It's Ranger Russ at the Meggs Point Nature Center, ready for another one of my favorite animals. I want to let everyone know that the Connecticut State Park system is up and running. The parks are open, most of them. Sometimes we do have to close because of capacity. So if you see that a park is closed, please try and find another park to visit or one of the state forests, or you could find some private land, a land trust or something like that. They have lots of hiking trails all across Connecticut. Connecticut Forest and Park Association has their Blue Blaze trails, which are a great place to get out, get some fresh air and some exercise, which is a good thing to do right now if you've been in quarantine for the past 3 months. Okay, we're going to get into my favorite animal today, and that one is the eastern screech owl. This is not the smallest owl in Connecticut. We actually have a saw-whet owl in Connecticut, which is substantially lighter than the screech owl. This owl weighs about 5 ounces. If you think of it as about as much as your TV remote, if you've got one of those big TV remotes, that's what this owl weighs. Take a look at the eyes. Now, obviously, this is a mount. Those eyes are not real, but that is what the eyes look like. They've got a beautiful yellow eye with a great big pupil in the center. In low light circumstances, you're going to barely see that yellow ring. And because these are primarily nocturnal, when they are hunting, you're really just going to see a little bit of a yellow ring on the eye. Okay, let's turn it. Now, there are 2 color phases of an eastern screech owl. This is gray phase, and the other one is the red phase. Phases usually mean that an animal changes color through the year, but not for the screech owl. The screech owl, if it is a red screech owl, it's a red screech owl its whole life. If it's gray, it's going to be gray its whole life. So it's not a phase that can change, okay? They are always that color. One study, some studies have shown that the red phase screech owls have a higher metabolism than the gray phase. I have no idea why that would be. It's very curious to me, but the red screech owl has a faster heart rate than the gray screech owl, which is pretty cool. Now take a look at the beak. Let's get it to focus in on you guys. There we go. So that little beak, you can see there are little feathers that look more like whiskers than feathers. It really wants to focus on me, doesn't it? Those little whisker-like feathers are for feeling when it's about to catch its food. So one of the things that it catches are insects in flight. Now, the screech owl has the broadest niche of any of the owls in North America. And we're going to talk about niche here today. That's a great vocabulary word, so you should probably see it in the virtual learning center, which is at meggspointnaturecenter.org. A niche is where an animal fits in the environment, in a food web, in a habitat. That's its niche. So it's the things that it eats, it's where it spends its time, and it's the things that eat it. This has a really broad niche. Almost any habitat. It could be in forests and fields, ponds, pond edges. Obviously, it's not swimming, but it will hunt over the top of a pond. All of these different habitats. They can be out in the prairies. They're not found on the other side of the Rockies. There's actually a western screech owl out there, which you would see from the Rockies on to the Pacific coast. So this is the eastern screech owl, and it's found all over the eastern part of the U.S., from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to Canada. In Connecticut, they don't migrate. Typically, when wintertime comes, they might pair up and spend the winter together, but most of the year they're pretty solitary. Is this a question? Somebody from Madison is saying they're lucky that they have a nature center in their hometown. That's really cool. You have to tell everyone in Madison that we're here, though, because I still meet people that live in Madison that don't know that the Nature Center is located in Madison. Okay, so back to the niche. These little owls eat everything. They will eat small rodents. They will eat bats. They will eat larger insects. They will eat reptiles. They will catch small snakes, maybe even a turtle. They will eat amphibians, so they like to eat frogs. Very, very broad range of food, very, very wide range of habitats. And then the things that eat them are pretty wide as well. So typically the main predator on a little screech owl like this is going to be a larger owl, like a barred owl or a great horned owl. Very unfortunate for the smaller owls, but the larger ones do hunt them. They're both active at night, so it makes sense that a big owl is going to target something smaller like this. The screech owl in many ways resembles a very small version of a great horned owl. It does get these really nice tufts right there. Okay. The color pattern's a little bit different though. For a great horned owl, it's going to be primarily brown. Again, for the screech owl, you're going to be either gray or red. But you do get a similar barred pattern in the front. It looks like the bark of a tree. So if this bird were sitting up in a tree, it would easily blend in with the bark in that tree. They've also been known to do something where they will stick their wing out or twist their body so they look like a snag in a tree or a broken branch or something like that. So that's one of their camouflage techniques. It's pretty neat that a bird is smart enough to know that if it changes its angle, then it's going to not look like an owl anymore and look more like the branch of a tree. Now, owls have fantastic hearing. If you've seen our other programs, and again, you can see them on the Virtual Learning Center, or you can go to the Meggs Point Nature Center YouTube channel. One of the reasons that owls have such a good sense of hearing is their ears are not lined up perfectly. So if you drew a line from one finger to another, your ears are going to be in a pretty straight line. Okay? The owl's one ear is going to be a little bit higher and further in front from the other ear. So they're not going to draw a straight line if you draw a cross. That allows, when the sound comes to them, it allows them to triangulate. So if you get two different points, then they can hear better where a prey item is. So if, for let's say, a mouse is underneath the snow or under leaves, they will be able to tell where it is just using their hearing. They have great night vision as well. Their eyes refract the light forward and back. So there's a little mirror in back so they get twice as much light absorption as we're able to do with our eyes. But they really depend on their hearing to catch their food. Now, if anyone has any questions, you can put them up at any time. Glad to hear screech owls and the other owls. That's pretty cool. I don't hear screech owls very often. Unfortunately, you don't hear them as much as you do the larger owls. The larger owls tend to call a little bit more because they're not afraid of other owls. These guys have to be cautious because when they start calling, it could attract one of the larger owls. Now, there is some debate about the name of a screech owl. John J. Audubon is the one that named it a screech owl. And there's some thought that he actually heard the barn owl, which does a blood-curdling scream, and then he saw this owl and he thought this was the owl that was making that screeching noise. They do make a high-pitched call. I don't know if I would call it a screech. It's not as loud as a barn owl, but that's how it got its name, is Audubon heard it and called it a screech owl. All right, do we have any questions coming up? No questions yet. The incubation on their eggs, so they'll lay their eggs, and it's typically 27 to 35 days for the eggs to hatch. I'm going to turn it around so you can see the camouflage pattern on their back. So even in flight, their wings have that broken up pattern, blends in really well when they're flying. I hear them once in a while in Shelton. Do hear other ones as well. So another interesting thing about the screech owl, because they have such a wide, broad niche, they can be heard anywhere in the state of Connecticut. So from the shoreline all the way up into the northern hills, from Rhode Island to New York, anywhere across the state, you'd be able to hear the screech owls calling. You might see them as well, but since it's such a small owl, now this one looks quite a bit larger because it's got its wings out. But again, they only weigh about as much as a TV remote. Let's take a look. Let me turn this, and we'll see if we can get it to focus on its talons. That's the fork for these birds. That's what they use to catch their food, and they use their beak to cut it, so that's the knife. That's how they eat their food. So these owls are not long-lived. They can max out at about 14 years, but in the wild you're not going to see them. Most of them are not going to live that long. They can have 7 to 9 young. Do they eat mice? Yes, they eat mice. Along with all the other things that they do eat mice. And they're great mousers. Now, like other owls as well, they do produce an owl pellet. So they will regurgitate, cough up any of the undigested parts of the animal when they eat. So usually it's a lot of fur and then some bones, some of the larger bones that are not digested. But with them, their pellet is going to be a lot smaller, obviously, than a great horned owl. I would say it's about 1/3 the size of a great horned owl's pellet. All right, any other questions? I think, do they eat mice was the last question. Okay, I want to let everyone know that for the rest of this week, we will be doing 2 programs a week, so 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock. Starting next week, I'm actually going to be doing a few programs from New Hampshire. Not sure that I'll be able to do them at 11 or 2. It may just happen to be when I get to a nice trail or something interesting to talk about. Hopefully I find a moose. That would be really awesome if I could film a moose and go live so you guys could see the moose as well. After that, after next week, we will be cutting down to just 1 program a week, and it will be at 11 o'clock. Do they happen to fall from their nest as often as other owls? So they do not fall as often as other owls. Great horned owls don't build a nest. They use another animal's nest, another hawk usually. So they tend to have a really crumbly type of nest, and when the babies get to a certain size, they fall a lot. These are cavity nesters, so they're going to find a hollowed out tree typically to nest in. That's also where they'll roost during the winter. So they don't fall out as often. If they choose a hollow that's too small, then one of the babies might get pushed out before it's ready to fly. So I do volunteer with a place called Hope, and I think we've done 2 renestings. I didn't do them, but they've done 2 renestings of screech owls that got pushed out of the nest. So they will occasionally fall out of a nest, but nowhere near as often as some of the other owls. Now, barred owls are by far the most common owl in Connecticut, which is again is a predator on the screech owl. So we find a lot more barred owls than we do screech owls. They just don't have the numbers that the barred owls do. All right, any other questions? Okay, so again, next week, make sure you tune in. Just keep an eye on Facebook. Also, if you go to Instagram, ranger.russ on Instagram, I'm going to try and post what time I'll be doing Facebook Live before I do it. So you'll get to see that on my Instagram, and then you'll be able to come in live and watch whatever I'm talking about up in New Hampshire. If the cell reception is good there, I know there are places up there where I won't have very good cell reception. In that case, I'm going to try and record some things and put them up on Instagram. So make sure you tune in all next week. I'll be cruising around up in New Hampshire, seeing what sorts of things we can find there and compare them to what we have here in Connecticut. All right, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. Hope you're still enjoying all of these quarantined videos and live chats. I will see you this afternoon at 2 o'clock for another program, and I hope to see everyone then.